11 years old. $114 saved from paper routes and selling chewing gum door to door. 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred at $38 each. The stock drops. He holds. It climbs back. He sells. Then watches it explode to $200 without him. That one mistake shapes the next 80 years of one man's life more than any university, any mentor, any book. This is not a story about genius. This is a story about 2 men who weaponized patience, who treated thinking as the most violent act possible, and who understood something so fundamental about human psychology that it gave them an almost unfair advantage over every single person they competed against for 70 years. Welcome back. Today we are going inside the minds of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And I promise you, by the end of this episode, you are going to see something you have never seen before about these 2 men. Because this is not a story about value investing. This is a story about a Z-Hensel operating system so powerful, so counterintuitive, that almost nobody has the stomach to actually run it. Let's go. Warren Buffett is born in 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska. His father, Howard, is a stockbroker turned congressman, a man of such rigid principle that he once returned his congressional pay raise because he did not think it was right to accept it. Warren absorbs this. But what really shapes him is not his father's principles. What shapes him is the library. Buffett reads every single book about investing, about business, about money that he can find in the Omaha Public Library. And he does not just read them, he devours them. He reads the same books multiple times. He takes notes. He reconstructs the arguments in his own head. By the time he is 12 years old, he has read every book on investing in the Omaha Public Library. He is not doing this because someone told him to. He is doing this because it is the most interesting thing he has ever encountered in his life. Now, here is something critical. When people talk about Buffett's genius, they focus on the mathematical side, the ability to value businesses, to calculate intrinsic worth. But the real engine underneath all of it is something much simpler and much harder. The ability to sit still and think for a very long time without needing to act. Most people, when they get information, feel compelled to do something with it immediately. Buffett learned early that the most powerful thing you can do with information is sit with it, turn it over, wait. And patience, deployed by someone with genuine intelligence and genuine preparation, is one of the most aggressive weapons that has ever existed in the history of commerce. Now let me tell you about Charlie Munger, because you cannot tell the Buffett story without Munger, and you cannot tell the Munger story without understanding what this man went through before he built his fortune. Munger grows up in Omaha as well, though he and Buffett do not meet as children. He is sharp, argumentative, relentlessly curious in the way that makes some teachers love you and others want to remove you from their classroom. He gets into Harvard Law School without an undergraduate degree because a professor makes a call on his behalf. He graduates magna cum laude. He is brilliant. But brilliant does not protect you from life. In the 1950s, Munger's first marriage falls apart. During the divorce, he discovers that his young son Teddy has leukemia. There is nothing to be done. Munger goes to the hospital to see his son, knowing every visit might be the last, and then goes home and weeps in the street because he does not want his son to see him fall apart. Teddy dies. Munger loses his son, his marriage, most of his money in the settlement, and has to start over in his 30s. And here is where I want you to pay very close attention. Because what Munger does next is not inspirational in the greeting card sense. It is something much colder and much more instructive. Munger decides that self-pity is the most useless emotion that exists. He decides that the world is not obligated to give him anything. He decides to rebuild. And he does it by doing exactly what he had always done: reading, thinking, learning from every domain he can access, building what he would later call a latticework of mental models. He does not talk about his grief publicly for decades. He files it away, not because he does not feel it, but because he understands that the grief will not build the future. Only work will build the future. This is what I mean when I say these men weaponized patience and thinking. Munger's entire philosophical system, the one that would eventually help Buffett transform from a good investor into a great one, was forged in genuine loss, in real pain. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because I think there is something in there that applies to every single person listening right now. But hold on, because the part of this story that most people never hear is coming up next. It has to do with the moment Buffett almost destroyed everything by letting his ego drive a capital allocation decision. We will get there. First, let me show you how these two minds actually work together. Buffett meets Munger in 1959 at a dinner party in Omaha. Buffett is running his investment partnerships at this point, generating extraordinary returns using the framework he learned from Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. Graham taught him to buy stocks trading below their intrinsic value, to find companies so cheap that even if the business was mediocre, you were getting more than you paid for. This framework makes Buffett wealthy. But Munger sees something that Graham's framework misses, and it takes him years to get Buffett to really hear it. Munger's idea is this: buying a cheap, bad business and a wonderful business at a fair price are not equivalent strategies. Over time, a wonderful business compounds. A cheap, bad business drains you. Pay a fair price for an extraordinary business, then hold it essentially forever. Let the compounding do the work. And the key word there is forever. Because every time you sell a great business, you pay taxes, and you have to find another great business to replace it. The tax drag alone is a massive hidden cost that most investors never calculate. Buffett once estimated that if he had simply bought and held his best investments and never sold them, he would have been significantly wealthier. That is the power of true long-term thinking, and it is genuinely one of the most counterintuitive ideas in all of investing, because the entire financial industry is built on activity, on trading, on doing something. Buffett and Munger built their empire on not doing something, on sitting there, on reading, on waiting, on saying no. Buffett has described his daily routine across 50 years of interviews, and it is almost identical every time. He wakes up, reads newspapers, reads annual reports, reads books. He estimates he has spent 80% of his career reading. Not in meetings, not on phone calls, reading. Sitting alone in an office in Omaha, deliberately far from Wall Street, far from the noise, far from the consensus. He once said that if you look at his calendar, it is mostly empty, and he is proud of that. He considers empty calendar space to be valuable real estate for thinking. This is cosmically different from how the rest of the business world operates. The rest of the business world treats a full calendar as a sign of importance. Buffett treats a full calendar as a sign of confused priorities. Every hour you spend in a meeting that could have been an email is an hour you are not using your most valuable asset, which is not your network, not your capital, not your reputation. It is your ability to think clearly. And clear thinking requires silence, requires space, requires the willingness to be bored. And almost nobody is willing to be bored anymore. But before we go any further, quick pause. If you want more deep dives into the operating systems of the people who actually change the world, not the surface level stuff, but the real psychology underneath the real decisions, subscribe right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it means you never miss an episode. And if this one is already doing something for you, leave a like. It genuinely helps other people find this conversation. Okay, now let me tell you about the moment Buffett almost destroyed everything. It is 1965. Buffett has become obsessed, in the old Graham style, with a struggling New England textile mill called Berkshire Hathaway. The business is terrible. Textiles are being obliterated by cheaper overseas production, but the stock is trading so low that even accounting for the bad business, there appears to be value there. Buffett starts buying. Then something happens that is both very human and very instructive. The management of Berkshire makes Buffett a verbal offer to buy back some of his shares. They agree on a price. Then Buffett gets the written offer, and the price is slightly lower, not by much, a fraction. But Buffett is furious, not because of the money, because of the principle. And in that moment of anger, Buffett buys enough shares to take control of Berkshire Hathaway. He fires the management. He is now the owner of a dying textile business. He spends the next 20 years trying to keep those mills alive while simultaneously building everything else around it. He has said multiple times since then, if I had never bought Berkshire and had simply put that money into insurance companies from the start, I would be meaningfully wealthier today. One moment of ego, one moment of anger, costs the greatest investor in history an incalculable amount of money. And Munger, when asked about this, is characteristically direct. He says, Warren, let emotion drive a capital allocation decision. That is the cardinal sin of investing. The lesson is not that Buffett is human. The lesson is that the system he and Munger built together was specifically designed to remove emotion from decisions, to create what Munger calls the iron cage of rationality, to make sure that the next time anger or excitement or fear or greed tried to drive the car, there was a process in place to put it back in the passenger seat. That process is what Munger calls the mental models framework, and it is, in my view, one of the most powerful cognitive tools ever articulated by a business person. The basic idea is this. Most people think with one or two disciplines. They are lawyers, so they think legally. They are economists, so they think economically. Munger believes that you need to collect the big ideas from every major discipline: mathematics, physics, biology, psychology, history, engineering, and build a latticework in your mind where these ideas can interact. Because the real world does not respect disciplinary boundaries. A business problem is simultaneously a psychology problem, an economics problem, a competitive strategy problem. The person who can see all of those dimensions at once has an enormous advantage over the person who can only see one. Munger once gave a famous lecture at Harvard Law School where he walked through 25 cognitive biases that cause intelligent people to make stupid decisions. Not just stupid people, intelligent people. Biases like social proof, where you do something because everyone else is doing it. Incentive-caused bias, where you believe what it is profitable for you to believe. Availability bias, where you overweight information that is easy to recall. And his point is not just academic. His point is that if you do not actively know about these biases and build systems to counteract them, they will control your thinking, and you will be convinced you are being rational while you are being completely irrational. Now here is where the story takes a turn that most people do not expect. And it is really the heart of what I want to leave you with today. Because we have talked about patience, and we have talked about mental models. But there is another dimension to these two men that is almost never discussed. They are both, in their different ways, ruthlessly honest about their own failures, not performatively humble, not falsely modest, actually honest, brutally so. Every year in his annual letter to Berkshire shareholders, Buffett explicitly discusses what went wrong, what he misunderstood, what he should have done differently, not buried in footnotes. In the opening pages, he once wrote that he makes mistakes of omission constantly, meaning he sees great businesses and fails to buy them, and that these mistakes cost Berkshire more than his mistakes of commission. Think about that level of self-awareness. He is telling you that the times he did nothing when he should have acted cost him more than the times he acted badly. And then he is telling you why. Not to seem wise. Because he has genuinely analyzed it and wants to do better next time. This is the operating system. The willingness to be wrong in public, specifically and precisely, and then to learn from it without defensiveness and without ego. Now, let me tell you about the culture they built, because this is where things get really interesting. Berkshire Hathaway is not a normal company. It is a collection of what Buffett calls wonderful businesses, run by managers whom Berkshire largely leaves alone. He does not hold weekly check-ins. He does not demand quarterly presentations. He hires extraordinary managers, pays them well, gives them clear metrics, and then gets out of the way. And the reason he can do this is the same reason everything else in the Berkshire system works. He has been extraordinarily selective about who he lets in. Buffett has said that when he acquires a business, he is essentially entering a long-term marriage with the management. You cannot change most people's fundamental character. So, you need to get the character right at the start. He looks for managers who love their businesses independently of the money. Who would show up to work if they did not need the paycheck? When he finds those people, he is loyal to them in a way that is almost old-fashioned. He does not second-guess them. He does not interfere. Munger takes this even further. Munger's view of management is almost evolutionary. He believes that the right incentive structure, properly designed, will produce good behavior almost automatically. And the wrong incentive structure will corrupt even good people almost automatically. He quotes Ben Franklin, "If you would persuade, appeal to interest, not to reason. If you want your managers to think in decades, pay them for decade-long outcomes." This sounds obvious. Almost no major corporation does it. Now something is coming in this story that shows you exactly what these men are made of. Because up to this point, I have been describing a philosophy, and ideas are easy. What separates these two men is what they did when the ideas were tested, when the market went against them, when the world called them obsolete. It is the late 1990s. The dot-com bubble is at full inflation. Every week, a new technology company goes public and doubles on its first day. Magazine covers are declaring the death of value investing. Analysts on television are openly mocking Buffett, saying he has lost his touch, that his methods are relics of a previous era. Berkshire's stock is declining while the market is roaring. And Buffett does nothing. He continues reading. He continues sitting in Omaha. He continues passing on technology companies because he cannot predict their cash flows 10 years out. People think he is finished. PNR. Then 2000 hits. Then the crash. Every genius who had been buying companies at 200 times revenues watches their portfolio collapse. And Buffett has not only survived, but is positioned to buy extraordinary businesses at reasonable prices because everyone else is too terrified to buy anything. He says, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." But here is what never gets emphasized enough about that line. It is not just a clever aphorism. It is a description of what he actually did. Under real pressure, with real money, while real people were publicly calling him a dinosaur, he did not change. He did not panic. He sat there and waited. Then, 2008, the financial crisis. The entire global banking system on the edge of collapse. Buffett moves. He writes a $9 billion check to Goldman Sachs on terms so favorable to Berkshire that it is essentially a rescue, with extraordinary upside built in. He writes his famous New York Times op-ed called "Buy American, I Am." He is buying when blood is in the streets. And people ask him, "How are you not scared?" His answer? He is not thinking about the macro picture. He is looking at individual businesses and asking, Is this business worth significantly more than I am paying for it today? If yes, he buys. Macro fear is irrelevant to him. Price relative to value is the only question. In 1999, Buffett's patience looked like stubbornness. In 2008, it looked like courage. It was the same thing both times, the same process. The same refusal to let the emotional temperature of the market change how he thought about individual businesses. And this is the hardest thing about doing what Buffett and Munger did. You have to be willing to look wrong for years before you are proven right. Most people need the market to validate them quickly. The moment they look wrong, they second-guess themselves, chase the crowd, lose the edge. Buffett and Munger's edge was specifically their ability to be wrong-looking for long periods without losing confidence in their process. And that confidence does not come from ego. It comes from the depth of the work underneath it. When you have read everything there is to read about a business, and you have thought about it for months, and you still believe it is undervalued, you can hold that position against external noise in a way that someone who spent an afternoon on it cannot. Preparation is the foundation of conviction, and conviction is what lets you hold when everything around you is telling you to sell. Now, let me bring this home with the one mental model I want you to actually take from this episode and use. Munger calls it inversion. It comes from the mathematician Carl Jacobi, who said, "Invert, always invert." When you are trying to figure out how to achieve something, most people think forward. What do I need to do to succeed? Munger says, also think backward. What would guarantee failure? And then, make sure you are not doing those things. Applied to your life. Instead of asking, how do I build a great career? Also ask, what would definitely destroy my career? Dishonesty, unreliability, letting ego prevent you from hearing feedback. Once you have identified those things, you simply avoid them. Munger says avoiding stupidity is easier than trying to be brilliant, and over a lifetime, it is more valuable. He and Buffett have both said that their greatest achievements have been not the brilliant things they did, but the stupid things they did not do, the investments they passed on, the times they said no when every instinct said yes. And here is the thing that ties everything together. Buffett has said he tap dances to work every morning. He is 93 years old, and he is still tap dancing. Munger worked until he was 99, still reading, still arguing, still pushing, not because they had to, because they could not imagine not doing it. Both of these men found something they loved so completely that wealth was almost a byproduct. And here is the real question I am leaving you with today. Not, can you apply their investment principles? Not, can you build a latticework of mental models? The real question is this: have you found the thing that makes you want to tap dance to work every morning? Because if you have, then patience is not hard. Saying no is not hard. Sitting alone and reading for 5 hours is not hard. It is what you want to do. But if you have not found that thing, then no strategy, no framework, no mental model will get you where these two men went. Because the real engine underneath everything they built was not intelligence. It was love. Love of the work itself. Love of the thinking. Love of the game. And that love is what made the patience possible. That love is what kept them going when the market called them wrong and the world called them obsolete and everything said stop. So the question is not whether you can tolerate the price they paid. The question is whether you have found something you love enough that the price does not feel like a price at all. That is the model. That is the lesson. See you in the next one.